All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Master Negotiators Live. I'm your host, J.N. Reid. I'm an associate professor of management at McGill University, where my specialty is negotiation and conflict resolution. So, what can you expect from Master Negotiators Live? Every week, I bring in two negotiation experts who come from sales, procurement, management, mediation, arbitration, law enforcement, you name it. And what they do is they provide to you the how-to of negotiation. So they give practical tips on how to negotiate. No fluff, just practical advice that you can use in your everyday life. So there are three segments that will be roughly 20 to 30 minutes each. The first one is called Master Negotiator Insights, and that's where we get to introduce the two guests and they share their best tips. The second one is called Master Negotiator Tactics, and there they will role play common negotiation situation. And then the last one is Master Negotiators Q&A, where my experts will answer questions from the subreddit negotiation. So please, if you're listening to us, type in the chat where you're coming from so we can say a quick hi to you. And if you hear a quote that you're interested in, you can share it on your profile with the link to this to this video, to this event, because the video will be posted in the event. So I will play the little jingle that we use for Master Negotiators Insights, and then I'll introduce my guests. All right, so I have my two guests here. So let me tell you first what Master Negotiator Insight is. I bring top negotiators from all walks of life, management, sales, procurement, you name it, and they come to share their best tips. It's all about learning from one another. And so let me introduce my guest. The first one is Ugo Merloni. He is a licensed psychologist and professor at the University of Torino. He has studied negotiation at Harvard University and trained with top hostage negotiators. Ugo has published over 80 papers and has trained professionals worldwide, including law enforcement and Europol analysts. Thank you so much, Ugo, for making time for us.
I don't think he can hear you, Jan.
Oh, Ugo, can you hear me? I think, Ugo, maybe you need to come back and reconnect, and then we will let you back in. So let me introduce my second guest. So Marc Morgenstern is an entrepreneur and venture capitalist with a diverse career covering technology, real estate, and law. He has played a pivotal role in various innovative startups and has extensive experience in M&A and equity financing. Marc serves as a mentor at large at UC Berkeley and is the author of The Soul of the Deal. And very, very nicely, Marc has agreed to give away a signed copy of his book today. So if you want to win a signed copy of the book, you need to post a comment during the live, and then I'll pick someone randomly after the show. Hello, Marc.
Hey, how are you today?
I am doing amazing. How about you?
I am peachy Jim Dandy fine. Thank you for asking.
Okay, amazing. So, Ugo, can you hear us?
I cannot hear you.
You cannot. So maybe you need to reconnect.
I cannot hear you.
Okay. So we will, let me just tell him to reconnect, and then we will do that. Hold on a second.
Right again.
Okay, I see we have people coming. Okay, he's coming back. So we will try. Let's start first with you, Marc. And we have people from Belgium. We have people coming from Cleveland. We have actually somebody who was a previous employee at Within3.
Well, since I was the co-founder of Within3, that's a good thing.
Okay, Ugo, can you hear us now? Okay, yes. Now it works. Okay, hello, Ugo.
Hello.
That's what I was telling before we got live. It's called techno stress. It's the stress of having technology not work, and there's just nothing else to do than to restart the computer or something like that. So, thank you. I'm happy that it works.
The dog ate my mic.
Yeah, the dog ate your mic, exactly. And you got it back, so that's perfect. So I have prepared a few questions, and please don't hesitate to build on each other's points. This is a conversation, and the goal is to get to know each other. If you're in the chat, please tell us where you're coming from, and we will feature it and say hi to you. So first, let me ask Marc. Marc, what got you into the field and what keeps you interested about it?
But first, I don't think I'm your typical guest because I wouldn't say I'm in the field of negotiation. I would say, having done 400 transactions, I negotiate because I'm trying to accomplish something, right? As a principal, usually. And so I've been the buyer, I've been the seller, I've been the CEO, I've been the lawyer, I've been the investment banker, I've been pretty much everybody around a deal table. And that's part of why it's pretty easy for me to look through everybody else's eyes and say, I'm saying something. What do I think this sounds like on the other side of the table?
Right. And so what motivated to write your book?
There are probably 10 different answers to that depending on the day. One answer would be I published 25 articles before the book. I get ideas in my head and I just can't get rid of them unless I do something with them.
Right.
And the book was sort of the culmination of that. And the other piece is you'd really like to be able to amortize hard-earned knowledge over 40 years and share with other people so they don't have to learn the hard way. Pretty much what you're doing here, right?
Absolutely. That's the same reason I'm doing this podcast. I really strongly believe that the knowledge on negotiation is not limited to academia. I think, industry people have tons of knowledge. And so my goal is to extract it, from their brain and try to learn from it. So thank you so much for the invitation, for accepting my invitation. What about you, Ugo? What got you into the field and what keeps you interested about it?
Oh, thank you for the question and thank you for the invitation, first of all.
Pleasure.
I think negotiation is in the intersection of science, which is strategical thinking, and art, dealing with people.
Yeah.
It's a metaphor, everybody knows it. If you don't know where to go, it's impossible to go. But even if you know where to go and you are unable to start up your car, you cannot go. Maybe I have a wonderful deal for you, but I'm so bad in presenting the deal to you and you say, no, this way, no. So putting together these two parts, I think is what interested me most.
And so you have a very, you've been in publishing in a lot of different management fields and you have published over 80 papers. Do you have any productivity tips for me?
The things are becoming strange in academia.
Yeah.
Because now they don't look at what you write, but how much you write and where you put it.
Right.
So be honest. I would say be honest. If you write high quality things, maybe they become important. There was a 70 last century comedian who wrote two cases. Either I'm a genius and nobody noticed, or I'm a stupid and everybody knows it.
That's really funny. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, and we have somebody from Paris. I'm actually born and raised in Paris. So hello. Really happy to have you part of this. And Barney is here. Oh, that's amazing. Hey, Barney. Really happy to have you on the show. Okay, so now I think it's probably my favorite question to ask, and I'm going to start with Marc. Marc, what's your number one negotiation tip? If you had to give one tip to someone.
Well, it's one tip, but it's a compound sentence.
Okay.
So it simply starts with negotiation is all about your counterparty, not you. And if you're trying to understand your counterparty, ideal negotiation is mutual education and exploration. I'm going to say that again because it's kind of quick, but it's mutual education and exploration. And that all starts with listening. And so my sort of synthesis of all of that, because I come from a music background, is you want to learn like a jam band musician, not like a lawyer. And what that means is jam band musicians are trying to hear somebody else to engage with them, to build on something, to end up someplace they don't know where they're going. Lawyers, remember I was a lawyer, so I'm not dissing lawyers, but lawyers are sort of trained to deflect, to distinguish, to conflate. They're not listening to build, they're listening to rebut. And that's not how you do almost anything that's complicated.
No, that's a very, very good point. And I think this is also one of the reasons I like the field of negotiation, because everybody has their own characteristics in terms of relationships. For example, if you look at law enforcement professionals, a lot of times, they deal with hostage situations and crisis situations, which is very different from managerial negotiation, where it's not a hostage situation and you'll work with that person for years. But I really have to agree with you. I was advising a couple of people this week, separate people on upcoming negotiations and big negotiations that they had coming up. And in both situations, the parties had just not considered at all what the counterpart would want. They were just thinking about what they wanted. And I was telling them, like, you're going to encounter a big surprise, let's see how it goes. But it was really, so I think it's a great tip. Thank you so much for sharing.
I'd also like to congratulate Hugo, because his first answer to you was perfect negotiation. First, he thanked you for the invitation. Then he validated what you had just said. So before you said anything else, you know that he knows you're a human being and he's acknowledged you and you're feeling good about listening to him. It was
absolutely
perfect.
No, absolutely. So what about you, Hugo? What's your number one negotiation tip?
Is do always a post-mortem and do with somebody you trust beside you. And look, Murakami wrote a quote: every good woodsman has one scar, no more, no less. You already had a negotiation. So do a post-mortem with somebody and look what went wrong.
That's extremely interesting. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I do a lot of simulations in the classroom. And if we didn't have the debrief, they wouldn't learn anything. Without the debrief, they just had a deal. And it's actually something that I think is very interesting about negotiation. I was asking someone, why don't people get better at negotiating? It seems like we all negotiate every day and several times a day sometimes, but people seem to just be very worried about it and anxious about it, and they don't get better at it. And somebody was telling me that it's because there is no feedback loop. We never know if we've done well or not. We never debrief with anyone. And so we just keep doing the same thing over and over without any clue if it worked out or not. And so I agree with you. I think the debrief in all of my classes is the most important part. It's the hardest part to do, right? Because this is when you have to give actual advice. Okay, so maybe what do you think, maybe Marc, can you tell us about a memorable negotiation experience you had?
Yeah, excuse me.
No problem.
So I don't always know why I do what I do. So don't ask me to explain why I did this, but
it's talent.
In a negotiation, the person on the other side of the table started screaming when we got to a page in a document. And he said, this whole page has to go. This entire page has to go. It's outrageous. And I looked at him and I said, really, the whole page? He said, yes, the whole page has got to go. So I picked up the document and I pointed at the bottom. I said, how about this? He said, Marc, that's the page number. Of course that's okay. I said, okay, but it's on the page. I just wanted to understand. How about this sentence over here? No, that's okay. Oh, okay. I sort of talked him through the page. I said, well, now you've got me really confused. What exactly on this page is so problematical for you? And he answered. Now, if I'd started with that, I don't know what his answer would have been. But part of negotiating and influencing is creating a context so when you finally get to the real question, you've prepared somebody to give an answer you'd like to hear. And that's what I frequently do, is that kind of crescendo, however you want to think about it. And by the way, everybody started laughing, including him.
Yeah, no, it's really funny. I think it's a great situation and a great example. I was hosting the McGill negotiation competition 2 weeks ago with 16 teams of MBAs. And the winning team was an all-female team from Washington University in St. Louis. And they really won, I mean, in my opinion, in big part because they actually took control of the entire contract. They took the board and they started to say, okay, let's start to see, when something was a little bit conflictual, they were moving on to another thing to see if they could just kind of like tighten up a contract together. And because the negotiation was just 40 minutes, it was very efficient to have them not just reject an entire thing, but to say, okay, so you're not okay with that. How about this? And then they would just kind of like work around and build a contract like that, which was very efficient to me. What about you, Ugo? Do you have a memorable negotiation experience?
Yes, to get promoted to full professor.
Wow.
It was a mission impossible because I was a new guy in the department. There was a lot of competition. The head of the department was not on my side.
Yeah. Been there.
Yes.
Yeah, I've been there.
And it took me 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, 3 years is not a lot. I mean, it's sometimes people just get stuck and never get it.
Yes. Yes.
I have friends who never got it.
Yes.
It seems longer if you're the one living it.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, but that's like the thing that. So I was tenured 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. It was a process that took me. First of all, it's like 8 years of tenure track. So you already have 8 years to prove your worth. But then the committee itself takes a year, and so it's insane. It's insane, and you have like. You have people vote against you, which is always fun. You have like all that kind of stuff going on. My mental health was not great, during that process. Like it was just hard because it felt like a tunnel that was just not. And so Ugo, like what advice would you have to somebody who's going through getting to be full professor, getting to be associate professor?
I think I really like to relate to books.
Yeah.
The 3D negotiation by Laxis Ibinius was wonderful to know the tables, where to move in across the tables, who to contact first, who to contact after. And I also had to manage some emails sent to the wrong person.
Yeah.
It was a bumpy road.
Yeah, I mean I think people don't realize how hard it is because it takes so much time. In a regular company, they wouldn't evaluate you for 7 years or 8 years, and then just the committees at various level would take 1 year. It's crazy,
Yeah.
And a lot of times, you fail or they reject you and you have to do it all over again, the year after or 2 years after. That's if you're not just an assistant professor, because then they just fire you.
Yes.
It's up or out, that's how it is. So,
yes.
It's basically, so you're literally fighting for your life. And so it's really rough. So Marc, like, what do you see as common mistakes that people make in negotiations?
Well, my theme is going to be constant, which is they think about what they need.
Yeah.
They talk, they don't listen. One of my maxims, which I know is God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, and the ratio wasn't an accident.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. So if you think to yourself, what exactly am I learning if I'm talking? The answer is nothing.
Yeah.
What am I learning when I'm listening? I don't know, but it's a non-zero possibility.
Right.
And when you listen, then you ask the next question. You don't ask close-ended questions. You ask open-ended questions. I'm not sure I understood exactly why you said that. Could you tell me what it looks like through your eyes? I want to understand, but you need to help me. And by the way, in doing that, you're deprecating yourself, not them.
Yeah.
And that always makes it easier for someone else to hear you and want to help you. Oh, this poor idiot doesn't even understand what I'm saying. Okay, I'll help him out.
Yeah, no, it's so important. So many times I advise people who are about to negotiate, and they're making assumptions about what the other party wants. And I always tell them, like, how do you know that's what they want? You haven't met them yet. You can't make that assumption, because if it's wrong, they're just going to think about that, and that's all they're going to focus on. So you need to ask them, during the negotiation, instead of assuming. But so many people effectively just focus on what they want and have a hard time understanding that it's a two-party thing.
And if you thought to yourself, why would you assume anything? Then you can just ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a very hard step for people. That's like asking as a weakness, or I should be so smart that I would know the answer to that. To me, it's the ultimate strength. Sorry, I don't understand. By the way, I sometimes at a negotiating table say to somebody else, listen, please talk me through how this thing helps you so I can understand it, and how you think it hurts me, by the way. Well, it's like a question they don't know how to deal with. Wait, you want to know how it helps me? Yeah, I do, because I can guess how it helps you, but I don't really know. I don't know your company. I don't know you. Why would I guess when I could ask?
And so, for example, if you assume, I was advising someone and they were assuming the other party would have alternative X, if the deal didn't go through. And I told them, you're making a huge assumption. Maybe their alternative is to do nothing. And so you can't assume that they're going to like spend all of this money if they can't have a contract with you. Maybe they're not considering that. And so it's always very interesting because you're explaining to someone what's going on in their head. Like, why are you doing that? Just listen to what they have to say. And I see Barney has a lot of smart things to say. And he says a useful acronym is WAIT. Why am I talking? Which I really love. I think it's a great acronym. Thank you. Barney had another one, which is, and I'm going to say it, it's really credited to him, but and I don't know if you guys know this, but it's what's the common point between like an oyster and a conflict. I think it's that. I'm going to screw it up. But basically, if Barney can like do it better, like I'll let him do it. But basically, it's that you can have a little irritation and it can lead to something beautiful. And so, like a pearl or a conflict could be something beautiful. So I thought it was really interesting. Okay. So we have somebody who's saying, how do you shift between negotiating styles based on the situational context? Ugo, do you want to take this one?
Interesting question. How are you bringing to the situational context? To fight, yes, probably you need just one person, but if you're helping the other people fighting, don't bring I think you should have your style and adapting to the contest. I know it's difficult because if you start with somebody who is really competitive and you start to think there is no food enough for everybody, it's difficult.
Right.
But maybe also you are bringing something on the table of that.
So what you're saying, and I really agree with this, we're bringing in, if you're negotiating with one person, you're bringing in 50% of the vibe and of the energy is coming from you. And when, you teach as well, Ugo, and, everybody knows when you're a professor, you can have a tremendous impact on the mood in the classroom. If you arrive and you're upbeat and you have like you're collaborative and you're excited, people will be much happier than if you're in a bad mood and sad or depressed or that kind of stuff. So a lot of times it's a performance, but I really believe, so to answer Angelo, I believe that, it's your responsibility to also bring in your style and try to guide the person, to follow that style. If they're becoming very competitive, a lot of times it's because they're worried about the outcome or they're worried about something. So maybe it's time to have a little bit of a discussion. But I'm interested in hearing, Marc, what do you think about it?
I think that you run into counterparties from really smart to really, I'm going to go with uneducated for the moment. They're novices. They've never done a deal before.
Right.
You run into people who are bullies. They're used to winning by shouting. You run into some really smart people who know as much or more than you do. You talk to people who are 22 or 72. And I say that because one of the things you're always trying to do is find the right vocabulary to use. So I'm going to go slightly off shift, but just say my wife is a strategic consultant. She was running a session and she made a joke that was based on when E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody listens. But everybody in the room was 25. They had absolutely no idea what she was talking about. So you've got to figure out what your fixed anchor points are, which you've been using for forever, but it's not a good anchor for this person. And then all of us automatically, if we're talking to a 6-year-old, you're going to use different language than if I'm talking with you. You don't even think about it.
No.
But you have adapted your communication style to the actual person you're talking with. You just don't realize you're doing that because you do it so automatically. You do it more consciously when you're negotiating with somebody because you're trying to figure out what words do they understand. Do I need to repeat something 3 times? Is once enough? Would 3 times insult them? Some people you've got to, hey, I know I didn't say this really well. Humor me and let me just say it again a different way.
Yeah.
And other people would go, Mark, I got it the first time. I got it, please. So every person is different.
Repeating can be very, very useful for a lot of people. Like just repeating parts of the deal. I was, whenever I give instructions to students or whoever, I'm always shocked to see, like, I repeated the same thing 3 times and I still have people who are not following the instructions because they were thinking about something else, or they were like, there's no way to go around it. You're always going to have a portion of people who have a hard time with this. So, yeah.
And that's part of why sometimes you just say to people, we've been talking for an hour. Could you just summarize what you think we've agreed to? I want to hear it in your words to make sure we've communicated. Yeah. By the way, I'm happy to go second and share. I could also go first. But the point is, I can't measure the effectiveness of my communication by how good I feel about it. The only thing that matters is what was heard and received and retained at the other end. And it is shocking sometimes the distance between those two things. And I'll just give you an example, which is sort of visual, except I was part of a 3-person team. We were doing a bunch of stuff together. We were all in a meeting. Came a certain point, we said, we need to take a break, walked out into the hallway. One person said, they said no. The other 2 of us said, they said yes. Now that's pretty different. and then we had to reconstruct what sentences led me to think they said yes and this other person to say no. We're on the same side. We're hearing the same thing at the same time in the same room. And the difference was yes or no. So I go back to assuming the other person heard what you said, understood what you said, is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. That's excellent. Thank you so much. And so we're reaching the end of the first segment of the show. And so thank you so much to my 2 guests for joining and sharing their insights. Please follow them on LinkedIn. And please also go buy the book, The Soul of the Deal from Marc. It's available on Amazon, and I'm assuming in everywhere where you can buy books. And so stick around for the next segments. Negotiation tactics. Let me just play the jingle and we will switch to the next segment. Where is it? Here. All right, everybody. So let me refresh the room if you just joined us. This is Master Negotiators Tactics. In this segment, we focus on practical role playing, but not in a weird way, just a regular role playing. I will be using a deck of cards I have designed for my negotiation classes, and each card features a negotiation situation. Your task is to role play how you'd approach the situation. It's all about demonstrating negotiation tactics in action. So let's dive in and bring these scenarios to life. If you're in the chat and you're just joining us, please type in where you're coming from and we'll be happy to say hello to you. So let me introduce my 2 guests for today. Ugo Merloni is a licensed psychologist and a professor at the University of Torino, a full professor, should I say. He has studied negotiation at Harvard University and trained with top hostage negotiators. Ugo has published over 80 papers and has trained professionals worldwide, including law enforcement and Europol analysts. Thank you so much for joining us, Ugo.
My pleasure, my honor.
Thank you. Marc Morgenstern is an entrepreneur, a venture capitalist with diverse career in technology, real estate, and law. He's played pivotal roles in various innovative startups and has extensive experience in M&A and equity financing. Marc serves as a mentor at large. Marc serves as a mentor at large at UC Berkeley and is the author of the book, The Soul of the Deal. Marc will give away 1 signed copy of his book today. This will be a raffle, and if you want to be considered, you need to post a comment during the show, and we will pick someone randomly after the show. Hello, Marc. How are you doing?
Well, modeling on what we heard earlier, which I know your audience didn't hear, but thank you for inviting me and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. So let me share my screen and we will go over each scenario. I'm doing this a little bit different this week, and so we're going to see if it's a better way to do this. So let me share this, and we're going to be doing it this way. Okay. So the first scenario that I have picked is negotiate a raise with your manager. And so it's probably the most common question I get from people, which is, how do I negotiate a raise with my manager? And so what I'd like for you guys to do, and maybe we can start with Ugo, it's to really role play it. You know, imagine I'm your manager and you're asking me to negotiate a raise. How would you go about it? What's a good way for people to ask these kind of questions?
First of all, you need to know if it's an opportunity or a necessity. Do you have another job, another offer giving you the same money? Because if you don't have a good alternative, ask, of course. If you don't ask, you don't get anything. But you need to be careful not to make angry the other party. And think about giving the manager other ways to compensate you. Money is not everything. Maybe she has something important for you, like remote time or more other bonuses, which are more important than a raise. And usually I suggest to go with equivalent value packages in your mind, thinking, okay, I will have one less day work, I will have a better health insurance, and put together things in order to give some room to your manager and getting something.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, right, that we need to always have alternatives to have power at the negotiation table with, you know, our current employer. I always say, you know, it's a bit unfortunate because the person who's looking for alternatives in their minds, you know, they're considering going somewhere else, and so it's not really in the company's interest to have people apply everywhere and send resumes and all that stuff. Unfortunately, I agree with you, if you don't have alternatives, it's very likely that the employer will give you maybe a small raise, but you're not going to have as much as with a strong alternative. One of our guests a few weeks ago, Mr. Encana, was actually, he has an agency that does negotiation for doctors. And he said that the first thing he does when he has a new customer is not going to the employer. The first thing he does is getting alternatives. And then he goes to the employer and he says, these are already secured, these jobs for your current employee. Can you match that? It's a lot more convincing and a lot more successful, according to him. And I agree. Thank you, Ugo. What do you think, Marc? What's your opinion on that?
Not as favorable as yours.
Okay, go for it.
So most of my life, I've been the CEO or the managing partner, which is
Right.
a different way of saying other people were trying to negotiate with me.
Yeah.
And the least effective thing that I would hear is, you know, I don't need this job. I don't have to have this job. I can go someplace else. But they didn't have to finish the sentence. My answer is, then I think you should avail yourself of that opportunity. I don't want anyone here who is that ambivalent. The second thing I would say is, let's talk about your compensation, because to me, it's three different things. One is, it is an absolute value. It's a number. You use it to buy groceries. So if you're not okay with the absolute value, let's talk about that. The second thing compensation is, it's a message. It's how does management view you? And therefore, what does the number mean? So what message is being given? The third piece is really relative ranking. What does it say about how we view you compared to other people? You might be super competent, but you do understand that there are 22 other people here who are also super competent. So that's my headset in looking at it. And I would find year after year, a partner would come in and say, I just had the best year I ever had. And I'd say, you know, that's so funny, because all of the partners who have come in here had the best year they ever had, but the firm didn't. How is that mathematically possible? What am I missing? And the answer was they would always focus on one, they'd find the one variable out of 15 statistics
Of
and
course.
say, look at this, it was 42% up better. I don't care is the answer as the manager. Please explain to me, if I'm the partner, what I should have said to me is, explain to me how you got to the number, what number you expect me to get to, what happens over a couple of years, and more to the point, what do I have to do to get to the place I'd like to be? And that's, again, mutual education and exploration. Maybe the answer is you're stuck. You're what you are you grind stuff out every day. That's what you
Right.
do. Until you start bringing in business, nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
Wait, I have to bring in business? Yes. You notice we've been telling you that
Yeah.
the last 20 years, but yeah, we were really,
Yeah. Yes, you do. Yeah.
really serious about it. And we did notice you don't have it. So it still all starts with looking on both sides of the table and knowing exactly who you're talking to, because really my answer was, if you're not 125% on board, whether it's a law firm, a startup, I can't afford to have you here.
Yeah.
It's too, it doesn't work for me at all, because now I have a potentially poisonous atmosphere,
Right.
toxic personality. That's a very different lens than.
Yeah. No, and that's extremely interesting, and I really appreciate your point of view. And I have to say that so connecting to what you said, one of the reasons I tell people not to lie, which is a question I systematically get, is, am I allowed to lie? What if I come up with a fake alternative and all that stuff? I say I've seen it happen several times where the CEO says to the person, then go with it, then go there, but the problem is it was a lie, and so you're really stuck. You burnt your bridge. And the second thing I wanted to say is, every single class I teach at McGill is a curved class, and so that means that the average of the class cannot be above 77.5%, which is a B plus. So it's not, not everybody can have an A. And a lot of times I have students a little bit in the situation you talk about with your employees, but I have students who are convinced that they did a great job. But I tell them, how could you know that? You haven't read anybody else's work. How would you be able to know that you've done a great job? And so a lot of times, they're thinking we're negotiating their grade, but in reality, what we're doing is I'm explaining to them, where they fit in the distribution and why they have this grade. And then I talk to them about, how can you do better next time so you don't end up with a B plus, but you end up with an A. And so it's something, I guess it relates a little bit to what you were saying, about really explaining, kind of realigning the person, and explaining to them the context that they don't have.
Yeah, it also puts a burden on you as the CEO or managing partner to have a rational answer for what the compensation is, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, I don't know, it seemed like a good number. It forces out a corporate philosophy, an organizational way of thinking. And that's, by the way, is helpful in both directions. But it starts by putting the onus on the CEO.
Yeah.
Please explain to me why that absolute value, what is the message, how on what stat or what number or what concept are doing relative.
But there is a lot of research on procedural fairness, and so Ugo will validate that. But which is that people are willing to have an unfavorable outcome, so to not have what they're asking for, as long as the process was fair. And so they want to know that they're treated fairly. And a lot of times they're asking for more because they're worried that they're not treated fairly. And in fact, in the next segment, we'll have a question focused exactly on that, and somebody who's now realizing that they might be underpaid. And so that's really something that people are worried about. Marc, do you believe
Can I just say one thing before this?
Yeah.
What I would also say to people is, I cannot guarantee to you that you're going to like the result,
right,
but I can guarantee to you the integrity of the process.
Exactly. No, but that's funny. That I always tell my students, I'm not here to give good grades. I'm just here for a fair process. Like, that's what I tell them every time. I don't care who gets an A. It's irrelevant to me. I don't see you as better or worse. All I care about is you get a fair grade. And if that's a C, that's a C. If it's an A, it's an A. But I agree with you. A Oh, I don't know. I forgot my question. So I guess I'm going to move. I'm going to move to the next one. Let me switch. Okay. So the next question we have is negotiate a budget extension with a key client. So let me give you a little bit more context. Imagine that you're a provider and you're providing a service to a client, and you realize that it could be anything, and you realize that the budget that you decided on, you're several months into it, and now you realize you're going to be short. Now you need to have a budget extension. So how would you approach that discussion with the customer? So maybe Ugo, do you want to give it a shot?
It was my fault to miscalculate the budget.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be your fault. It's like sometimes, I guess it depends on how you manage the customer. But I know I had an advertising agency in Paris like 20 years ago. And I know sometimes we had customers that would add stuff up or would maybe make too many changes. And then you end up that you're running out of budget, And so, but that's not how they see it, because to them, it was like the one thing and they didn't understand. So I guess you have to manage the customer in advance, right? To tell them.
Yes, write a contingent contract as much as possible, because contracts are incomplete by definition. But anyway, try. It's too late. Sorry.
It's too late at this point.
Late. How can I, if it's my fault, if you're asking me too much, I can try to tell you, okay, we agree on these things. And again, contracts are incomplete. So you say, no, I didn't see things this way, the other way. And how much important is it's a key client, sorry. It's a key client.
Yeah, it's a key client.
And it's your mistake. Own your mistake, sorry. Don't cheat a key client if you made a mistake in writing the budget, sorry.
But maybe then it's a good opportunity when you renegotiate the contract for like the next period. It's a great opportunity to add a clause or something like that, right? To not make that mistake. Yes. Marc, have you been in that situation before, Marc?
No, never. In 30 years of law, it never happened.
Yeah, it never happens, right?
So first, I agree with everything that just got said. And second, it sort of goes back to how you think about things generally. And one of my views and maxims is an expectation unarticulated is a disappointment guaranteed.
Yeah.
So let's put it in this context. Somebody says, I need a non-disclosure agreement, whatever it is. They want a particular contract. What do you think it will cost? Without thinking, you might say whatever the number is, $1,000 to $2,000, because it's a pretty routine document and you know more or less what it should cost and how long it should take. Okay. What you didn't say was what you both just referenced, which is along the way came a change order. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to draft in some stuff that deals with this tax issue. Okay, we can do that. I'd like to deal with a particular supplier. We can do that. So if you've had 6 changes, you are not doing the contract you agreed to. So at the beginning, which is, you just talked about the next contract, hopefully you already did it, but here are the assumptions of what we're going to do. Right? And if it strays out of that, and it could be, it takes more than a month, right? We're negotiating with another party. We both think it's about a month. Here's about what it should cost. It takes a year. The deal stops. It picks up again 4 months later. Nobody remembers what any of the documents mean. You change negotiators. Anyway, thousands of things can change that are actually, they're nobody's fault. They're just stuff happens that were outside the mutual articulated expectations.
That's a very good point. And I'm interested in hearing. Oh yeah, Ugo, go for it.
Yes, I think the answer is easy. You have a key client. Lose the battle, win the war. Yeah. Focalize on the relation. There's no time with a key client to be greedy, to look greedy or clumsy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point. And I'd like to add, and so now that I'm thinking about my past life in an advertising agency, something that I noticed very quickly is sometimes we would agree to do something as a favor. We would agree to do it for free. And I've noticed that people were horrible to us. Like they would never be happy. They would always ask for a million changes. it was just bad, like we get no thank you, whatever. So I know the first year we did a few things like that as a favor, and then we completely stopped because it was just too hard to maintain. And Marc, I'm interested in seeing, have you ever experienced the same?
Yeah, pretty much. And the nicest way any client ever objected to a bill is doing a venture capital deal as a lawyer, sent the bill for 2x. That's how much time we had in it. The client came down, and by the way, if it's important, do it in person. That's a first rule of negotiating or selling anything. And he sort of looked at me and he said, I know you love me, but do you think maybe you loved me too much?
That's funny.
Okay. What a fabulous way to say, Marc.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went back, we re-looked at it. When we re-looked at it, we actually agreed with where Hugo started, which is, that was on us, right?
Yeah.
We sent somebody off to do some research and we weren't paying attention. It took 35 hours and it should have been 3. That's on us. Either way, his real point, which is, what is your relationship with this person? Is this a bill in the middle of 20 years of relationships?
Right.
Then you usually start with the assumption that the client's right. And it's sort of a rebuttable presumption.
Yeah.
You're going to be right. Look at it as a cost benefit over 20 years. It's a blip.
Yeah. And it's something also, and I think it's a good point that both of you alluded to, but you can't really change the rules in the middle of it. If you've agreed to something and then it took you more hours, but that's not part of the current contract, but you decided to do it anyway, then that's what it is. Like, I know, for example, my students, if I say something in class and then I do something different, the week after, or I change it, and then some people get a bad outcome because of it, they're very upset. They're extremely upset. So I'm better off just accepting. One thing, for example, that students hate is and I never do it because it's so unpopular, but it's curving everybody's grade. And so it's curving down everybody's grade and taking 2 points away from everyone. They hate that. Like, they absolutely hate it. You're going to get trashed in the evaluations and all that stuff. So now I always aim to be very conservative in the grades I get. I give, because I know I'm going to have to fit a curve. And I don't want to be the one telling people, oh, that thing I gave you, I'm actually taking it away. And really, people don't want to have that.
But you've also articulated your expectations at the beginning of the class. You said to them, this is how it will be graded. If you really don't think it's fair, you shouldn't be in this class.
Yeah.
But if you remain in this class, you understand the rules of the road and you've accepted them. So
yeah. No, but I think it's so, the average has to be 77.5. And I think the first midterm I ever did, my grader came back and the average was 83. And I was just thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. And so I had to curve everybody down. It was a disaster. People just don't like that. So ever since, I've been aiming for something a bit more reasonable. So let's take it as an example. So if you want to dispute a charge with a service provider, so it could be anything, but it could be, for example, you overdrafted your account and then your bank charges you $50 for it and you feel like it's unfair. How would you, so you're calling your bank, what's the right way, besides anger, what's the right way to address this? Maybe, Hugo, do you want to go first?
What is your history? If you never made a mistake, maybe you can try to...
Never made a mistake.
And the bank has made mistake with you, of course. Every bank makes mistakes with us.
Right. But not automatically. It could be just that, they're charging you overdrafted your account unexpectedly and they charge you a very strong, a high amount. Because I see a lot of times on the internet, in the negotiation subreddit, I see people asking that question over and over, and then people just say, just call them. But okay, but to say what? What are you going to say? What are you going to say to that person? How are you going to get the agent on the phone to give you a one-time, exception?
My wife has an account with a bank, and I have my account with another bank. And with my wife bank, this problem never happens.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
No.
What
do you mean?
With my wife.
Oh, I'm sorry. I get it now. I thought you were talking to me. Okay, I get it. I hear what you're saying. Okay.
Perfect example, by the way.
Yeah, that was great. No, this is great. This is great. Thank you, Hugo. What about you, Mark? Like, how would you deal with that? Is it something you would do, like personally?
No, because I value my time very highly, and if I made a mistake by $72, it's not worth my time to address it. When, by the way, my wife would, and I'm not saying I'm right or she's wrong. I'm just saying we have very different. To her, it is the principle of the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the principle; it's the money. So,
no, I understand.
It's the money, but in comparable circumstances, you sort of think about an effectiveness hierarchy is how I think about it of negotiating. In person is the best always. Voice to voice, Zoom is second. Telephone call, so it's voice to voice, is third. Digital is the last for a bunch of reasons. And part of it is that digital is terrible because it isn't a dialogue, it is a sequential monologue.
Yeah.
And that's why the advice that they're giving, which is talk to a human being, talk to a human being. How do you prepare for any negotiation? If I'm really teed off about something, I wait at least 15 minutes. I take deep breaths. I walk around my house.
Yeah.
I compose myself just as you walked in your classroom with a, hey, thanks so much for talking with me. I have a sort of a problem, and I'm hoping maybe you can help me because you sound like somebody who can help me.
Right.
Okay, so you heard all of why I said all of that. And then still educational exploration saying, this charge is there. It surprised me, not made me angry. It surprised me. I wasn't expecting it. I don't understand it. Could you please explain it to me, how it got there and what it means and why? And let them talk with you. At the end of that, maybe they're going to say, you're right, we were wrong, we're going to change it. They may not. It also gives you the opportunity to say, I'm a little disappointed. I'm not angry. I'm never angry. I'm disappointed. I've been a loyal customer for 25 years. I have very high expectations of you, the vendor, and this really isn't consistent with your past performance. So, I'm disappointed.
Right.
I have used that exact approach with, it doesn't matter, a car. It happened to be a car repair. And I said, there's a reason I've dealt with you guys for 25 years. Because, okay, 3 days later, I got a really nice note from them that said, we thought it over. You have been a really loyal customer. We shouldn't have sent you that bill. Don't pay. But didn't have on the phone, right?
Yeah. I really like it. I wrote a couple of papers on aggression towards frontline staff, but mostly in ERs. But I really reviewed the literature as well in restaurants, customer service, customer representatives, and all that kind of stuff. And I think, a lot of them are really dealing with anger almost all day long. All they have is people angry. And I think it connects to what you guys have been talking about, since the beginning of the show, which is that people focus on their own point of interest and they don't really think about what the other party is thinking about. And the thing that sometimes people forget is that if you yell at someone and you treat them like garbage, they're not going to be willing to give you a favor. Like they're just going to say, well, that's it. That person is angry anyway. And they're not going to feel collaborative about it. They're going to be defensive about it. And so what I like about your approach, Mark, is it's very collaborative. It's not aggressive at all. It is assertive, though. It explains assertively what you think. But it opens a door to repairing the relationship or strengthening the relationship as opposed to damaging it.
Yeah. A piece of what you just said, we're on a family trip. We're in Rome. All the computers in the airport went down.
Right.
So total pandemonium. I mean, thousands of screaming people. So we finally got to the front of a very angry line. And the first thing I said to the counterperson is, this has got to be like one of the worst days of your life.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that you're having to deal with so many unhappy people. I'm not here to make your life harder. I just like to see if you can help me out. The second I said, you're having a horrible day,
I get it.
Yeah. The bulb went off, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and they want to help you out. If they feel that you're treating them with respect, they're way more likely to help you out. Even though, I mean, it's difficult, right? Because you're stressed out as well, and you're anxious as well, and you want to make sure that you're going home and that you're the one who gets into the flight and not other people. But at the end of the day, if you just think about your own points or your own vantage point, then anger sounds like the right solution. But if you think that you have to deal with a human who needs to let you through, then there needs to be respect.
And just
Yes,
think about how much you like to be yelled at personally.
Yeah, no, I hate it. Like, absolutely. I mean, if a student was yelling at me for a grade, like, one thing is for sure, I'm not changing the grade. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Ugo, go for it.
yes. Before COVID, I used to go to restaurant quite a lot, and I try to build rapport, which comes from crisis negotiation. And I don't think they serve me; they take care of me. And I
Yeah.
remember I went to a restaurant. I told the waiter, "Oh, this is my birthday." The year after, I came in the same time of the year and told me, "Oh, it's the time it's your birthday." And it was really wonderful. But
Yeah.
somebody who remember me, they take care of
Absolutely.
me. They take care of me. They are not serving me.
No, absolutely. And you treat them as equals, and we're all just in different positions and different roles, and they're not here to like be your servant. They're here to do business with you
Yes.
and have a good relationships. Perfect. So let's try to do one more, and then we'll switch to the next segment. But so this is a complication card. And this is where you have to go in a negotiation when you don't know the other party very well. And so I'd love to have your tricks or your tips on, let's just imagine you have to negotiate maybe Mark, in business, and there's been a change in your customer and it's a new person. And now you have to negotiate maybe a renewal or something like that.
Yeah.
How would you deal with the fact that you've never met the person and you don't know them at all?
The one thing that's different about my negotiations from many others is it can take months. You're going to be dealing with the same person repeatedly. So to go back to your earlier point, you never lie.
Yeah.
And because it's going to bite you, you have to be who you are. At the same time, knowing that, my first question to everybody is, listen, I'm sure this is not the usual thing you do at the beginning of a meeting with somebody you don't know, but because I'd love to learn about you, would you be willing to share your life story with me? And it's not a test. It's not an inquisition. Put in or leave out anything you want to, but it will help me enormously and we'll communicate much better.
Yeah.
And as you listen, every once in a while, you'll find somebody, by the way, who just says, no, I mean, that's just too intrusive. And you go, okay.
How dare you? Yeah.
But most people, a couple things. One is people's favorite subject is themselves.
Yeah.
So they're happy to talk. And whatever they tell you, I don't know, I went to such and such a college. Okay, that's a fact. What I want to know is, how did you decide to go there? What was your process? If every time somebody hits a transition point, you can hear how they made a decision, by the time they've talked through 4 of them with you, you should have a pretty good idea of how this person thinks in your context, because it's all about decision making. And it's very gentle. And anyway, that's what I always do.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that it's an exploration, right? It's what you were talking about earlier. It's exploring with curiosity, the other party. I really like that. Ugo, what do you think of that?
Let them tell their story. I don't know you. I was used to talk with other guy. Now I see you. How can we work together well? What were you doing before coming into this role?
Yeah.
What happened in the company? I'm very happy to meet you as well. I work very well with the other guy, and now happy to work with you as well.
That's really good. Thank you so much. So we're reaching the end of this segment. Thank you so much, you guys, for the concrete, role play we've been doing. I think it's very, very valuable. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience has been learning a lot. So please, if you're in the audience, go follow Marc and Ugo on LinkedIn. They have a lot of valuable things they're sharing. Also, you can go and get the book from Marc, The Soul of the Deal. It's available on Amazon and where you can purchase books. Thank you so much, you guys. And I will then introduce the next segment. Let me just do this.
Okay.
Okay. There it is. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're just coming into our live, my name is Jayan Raitt. I'm an associate professor of management at McGill University, where I teach negotiation and conflict resolution. And so today we are hosting a little show that is called Master Negotiators Q&A. And it's a show where I feature seasoned negotiators who answer real-world questions from Reddit. And so our negotiation experts provide concrete advice on a range of topics from managing everyday conflicts to mastering complex business situations. And so I am joined today by two master negotiators. And so the first I'll introduce is Ugo Merloni, who is a licensed psychologist and professor at the University of Torino. He has studied negotiation at Harvard University and trained with top hostage negotiators. Ugo has published over 80 papers and has trained professionals worldwide, including law enforcement and Europol analysts. Thank you so much for joining us, Ugo.
My pleasure and my honor.
Thank you. And so we have Marc Morgenstern, who is an entrepreneur and venture capitalist with a diverse career covering technology, real estate, and law. He's played pivotal roles in various innovative startups and has extensive experience in M&As and equity financing. Marc serves as a mentor at large at UC Berkeley and is the author of the book, The Soul of the Deal. Marc will give away a signed copy of his book today. And to enter the raffle, you need to post a comment during the live show, and I'll pick someone randomly once the show is over. So thank you so much, Marc, for joining us.
Thank you for your gracious introduction.
Thank you. Why should people buy your book? What was in your mind the goal of writing this book?
So I very rarely say that the way I think is better or worse than anybody else. I do think it is consistently different, and different has a value. So you're not going to find too many M&A and venture books that start with the premise that I learned how to do what I do by selling encyclopedias door to door and following the Grateful Dead, right? And so even the concept that music and cadence and rhythm and tone and tenor matter is surprising to people. And the concept that, let's go back to why do you listen? If you're not listening, you can't improvise.
Yeah.
And every negotiation involves improvisation. The better you're listening, the more you can understand where to either pivot to or to improvise. If you're not listening to your counterparty, you're not going to do that. So learning to listen like a musician is very different, and it gives you, anyway. So the stories are pretty accessible. They're all true, which makes them even better. And I wrote them trying at least to be as funny as I could be, because people learn better if they're laughing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so do you have a tip on how to sell an encyclopedia door to door? Because I'm assuming people don't want people to like knock at their door. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it actually, I'll keep this shorter, but it starts with the person in this house is not the same as the person in the next house,
right,
who is not the same as the person in the next house. And that's really the first rule of negotiating, which is the last deal shouldn't be your guideline to this deal. Okay, everybody's different, and you do the same thing. First, you've got to get in, right? And let's go back to how do you prepare? Well, they were nights. It was 85 degrees. It was Southern Ohio. I was still wearing a suit and a tie, so I made it easy for somebody to look out and say, "Okay, they don't look like a bad person. I'll at least open the door." 95 times out of 100, they did not open the door.
right.
Next rule of negotiating, you can't take it personally. They don't know you. They're rejecting me. And if I were them, I wouldn't open the door either. So you get to think that way. And then you walk in, if they're nice enough to let you in, and you're in somebody's family room or living room. And the first thing you're doing, other than saying hello, what's on the wall? Is there a TV? Is there a radio station on? Is there a Yankees mug? Is there a Cleveland Guardians mug? What can I see that's going to provoke commonality and some bonding? Oh, you love the Rolling Stones. I think they're great. How did you
So do
follow?
I. Yeah.
Okay. Everybody, if you try, you
Yeah.
can always find a way before you've done anything to find commonality with the other person. And that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to take two islands and, at least for the moment, make them a peninsula.
Did they teach you that, or did you figure it out yourself?
No, they did not teach me that. They did teach me some things that were super helpful. So we did role playing.
Yeah.
Everybody would come in and say, I got turned down last night. Well, tell us what you said and what they said. And we'd all basically do what you're doing right here, which is, okay, I tried this. It worked better. You might want to think about it. Okay, that's pretty good. I can do that. The other thing you learn is that the first rule of selling anything, find out what your customer wants to buy, then sell that to them.
Yeah.
And the concept, most people who still know what an encyclopedia is, and a physical encyclopedia.
I remember. Yeah.
Well, I actually took it into when I was teaching street smart startups. I actually took an encyclopedia in because I wasn't sure they would know an encyclopedia. But bad salespeople would present it the same way. It's an encyclopedia, period. I would listen to what were they trying to buy. So if in their life story they said, my greatest regret is I didn't graduate from high school,
Wow.
let's guess that the product I'm trying to sell is emphasizing education.
Yeah.
If somebody says the house next door got a Cadillac and I'm really sorry I don't have one. Okay, well, maybe this is like purchase envy. This is going to show how you're better than them. These aren't judgments.
Yeah.
And my children, by the way, call them very Machiavellian, and I don't see it that way. I understand why they say it. I just don't see it that way. Because an encyclopedia is a physical thing, but it can be framed or presented as many different things. And you're trying to find the frame that works the best with your customer.
That's extremely interesting. It reminds me of a guest I had last year who was an FBI profiler, and he was really saying a lot of what you're saying, which is kind of picking up on cues and trying to have a portrait of the person, of who that person is.
Yeah, and in a very short time period, which is why asking them to tell your life story, it's the fastest way I've ever found.
Yeah.
They're telling me who they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to be answering questions from the subreddit negotiation. So let me share my screen and we will be using that. Perfect. So I'm going to read it because there is also a podcast version of this show. And so the first question I'd like for you guys to answer has a title, which is Negotiating a Better Deal for a Fixer Upper Car. And I want to say the past few weeks, I have read the raw post, but this week I rephrased them a little bit for consistency and to make them easier to understand. So the person says, I found a car on Facebook Marketplace that I'm interested in, but it's been in a pretty serious front-end accident and needs a lot of work. The seller is asking for $15,900, but I'm hoping to negotiate it down to around $13,000. Since it's tough to negotiate prices effectively online, I'm planning to meet with the seller in person. As a 19-year-old looking to improve my sales and negotiation skills, I'd appreciate any tips or advice on how to negotiate a better price. So do you want to go first, Hugo? What advice would you have for that person?
Look on the social for the guy you're meeting. If he's an heavy metal band lover, you don't want to go there dressed like a rockabilly guy.
Yeah.
Know where you're in front of, and what is I think that the question is twofold. One side is about the car, but the second part is
about tips. Yeah.
Tips. And
let's focus on the first part.
Okay.
What does this person need to do to be able to have a convincing argument that the price should be $13,000 and not $15,900?
Fisher and Yuri use objective arguments.
Yeah.
Have a research on listing of cars, and maybe if you have a friend working in auto repair, bring him with you. to ask an assessment of how the car has been damaged.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Ugo. What do you think, Mark? What advice would you have for that 19-year-old?
Part of it is to flip the script.
Yeah.
Start by saying to the seller, how did you get to a price of $50,900? Just educate me. It's a number. What's the context? What did you think about? What did you pay for it? How long did you have it? Why did you buy it? You get them talking about it. The front end is damaged. Wow, were you in an accident? I hope you weren't hurt. When did it happen? Where did it happen? How come you haven't just fixed it up yourself? All of those questions will give you cues long before you're trying to get to a different price. Because let's pretend that the 15.9, let's pretend the answer is it's the Green Book average price for a car in good condition. Well, when I look at it,
it's not in good condition.
Bad condition. So I don't think that should be the starting point. I could be wrong, by the way, but either I think the price should be adjusted or you should agree to pay for the repairs to put it in good condition. So how would you like to approach that? And
yeah,
Ugo earlier did a really good thing that I want to reinforce. He gave the person who's talking to two choices. So if you only give somebody one choice, you don't know what's going to happen, but people love to choose. So now I've just put on the table two different ways for the seller to respond. Let them choose, which also makes them feel empowered and validated, and you know where you're going.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I went crazy, but I saw balloons pop behind you. Like, I'll have to go back. I don't know if it's part of your webcam or if I did that with Restream and I'm not aware of it. I don't. Am I insane? Like, I just saw it was crazy. So I'll send you the video because it's great. It was really interesting. I really agree with you guys, what you're saying. I think, I hear a lot of this argument of, it's 16,000, but I'd prefer to buy it for 13,000. And I always say, it doesn't matter what you prefer. I mean, of course, you prefer to have it for free, but you need to know how much it's worth. And then you need to deduct some sort of an amount based on the repairs. But so typically, yeah, you would want to see kind of like what's the average value for a car in good condition. Then you would want to go and see probably an auto shop and then see how much it would cost to repair theoretically that car. And then, then you go and you talk to them. But just because you'd prefer to have it cheaper is not going to be convincing to the other party. You have to have a reason for that.
I have a friend who in negotiation does what I think is a very smart thing. You've finished everything you just said. And then he just says, well, if the situation were reversed and I own this car and we're selling it to you, do you think this price is fair? And it's surprising. A high percentage of time, if you're dealing with a semi-decent human being, that question really gives them a pause. And they may say something like, well, it might be a little bit high.
Yeah.
But you've given them an opportunity to go first.
It seems like it's a great way to cancel out the endowment effect that people experience whenever they own something. To them, it has more value than if somebody else owned it. Yeah. And I was actually in a situation similar to this one. I was making an offer for a condo, and the person had extremely, extremely high ambitions, which I believe were, way exceeding what I was willing to pay. But I don't think the person is thinking about, is somebody going to be willing to buy this? I think they're just really focused on the fact that it would be great if there was somebody who would pay for that price. But I think, that's a great tip. I should have asked that, which is, what if it was reversed? What would you think of that? That's a great tip. Thank you. So let's go to the second one. So the second one is about navigating negotiations with confidence. So the person says, which is very, very common, negotiating isn't my strong suit, but it's a necessary part of life. From dealing with contractors to auto body shops, I often feel like I'm being taken advantage of because I struggle to assert myself. For those who can relate, how did you overcome this hurdle? Any tips for practicing in low-risk situations? So Ugo, do you have an advice for this person?
Practice, have a feedback, post-mortem. Don't try at home alone, they say that, but start with low-risk situation, things where you can discuss things. Don't start with a huge negotiation, life-changing negotiation.
Yeah.
And yes,
Yeah. Hey!
Yeah, let's go first. Yeah. But
yes.
but interestingly, so many people are in that situation because to them, negotiating is like going to the dentist, so they avoid it. And then
Yes.
they avoid it up until the point where there is no choice. They're going to have to do it. And it's interesting to me because if it were any other skill, for example, if it was a tennis match and you were having a tennis match in a week with a professional tennis player, you would definitely buy a racket and then play on your own with a wall to try to do it. But for some reason, for negotiation, people just show up. They haven't prepared anything. They've never negotiated anything. And they're expecting to have a good outcome, where they're versus somebody who's a professional negotiator. I'm not sure why that is. It's just really strange.
I remember when I was a student, the day before the exam, you look on the book, okay, that I know. Okay, I don't want to do anymore. Okay, I don't study anymore.
Yeah. So something that I do with my students in every single of my classes. Oh, so sorry. Yeah, you're frozen, Hugo.
Yeah.
Maybe do you want to reload your screen and then come back? So while Hugo figures it out, we're going to see. Okay, I think now it's working. Okay. So one thing that I do in all of my classes, and it's not something I came up with, it's something Emily Hunter came up with at Baylor University, but I attended a conference where she was presenting this and I've stolen it and I've used it ever since. But I do this master negotiators contest in every single of my classes where I tell my students that they have to negotiate for real money outside of class. And what they do is they go on Craigslist and they buy something, and then they go on Craigslist again and they sell it. And every time they have to just negotiate a benefit. Could be anything, could be delivery, could be a lower price, could be sweetening the deal or whatever. But the great thing is everybody has like a house with a bunch of stuff they could sell, that they don't want anymore. And why not just sell it on the internet and just get some experience doing it that way? But I think, it's a great way. I've done it because a lot of people otherwise, they get very comfortable doing simulations, but then they never negotiate for real. And so I really wanted them to kind of force themselves to go negotiate for real things.
Yeah. Another positive there is if they're both on the buy side and the sell side, they will get the concept of it looks really different depending on which side you're on. And what did you just learn about what did it feel like when you were selling? And it's mine, so it's the best, versus you're buying and you're knocking everything down. In the world of documents, when people go crazy, you presented them a document. You just say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the document again, except this time I will write your name as the buyer and my name as the seller. So same document, but I'm going to switch it. Tell me how it reads to you. And anybody, and I've never, so positively, everybody then goes, I didn't really realize why this would pinch you so much on your side. Because when I read it through your eyes, whoa, I might have reached there a little bit. Let me take another crack at it. But every way you can make somebody be their counterparty increases their ability to be them. And part of what you just said, Jan, is what did you think about beforehand? Did you write down the 10 variables? The alternatives? You don't want to be inventing them while you're negotiating. So at a minimum, you walk in, here's my legal pad. I've thought about it, right? Which is part of what you said. You don't just walk in. I've thought about it. What do we need to talk about? What are the minimum things? What things are nice? What are needs to have and what are nice to have? And that exercise gets those things in your brain. So then when you're trying to do them in real time, it's not the first time you've thought it through. So it's a way of practicing yourself, which you can do by yourself. It's not as effective as what both of you are saying, which is feedback from a third party, which is better, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the things that I love when they write a report about that activity is what they say, oh, wow, like when I was buying, I was always wondering, why are they not answering me? Like, why is this person reading the message and not answering? And then when they were selling it, they realized they were getting a lot of people lowballing them. and that they just didn't feel like answering because they just, some sort of a chilling effect or something. But it was just, I agree with you. It's very, very interesting to see both. And Alex actually is helping us out and explaining what's going on. The balloons. So it seems I'm not crazy. Are you using a Mac?
Well,
Are you using a Mac?
I'm sure this is proof of that, but okay.
Are you using a Mac? Is it what's going on or no? Mark, is it a Mac OS computer or maybe that's it?
I'm on a Mac, but I don't see anything. Just
no, I know. So I mean, honestly, either that or I'll get myself committed later because like it was in my periphery and I saw a bunch of balloons behind you and I thought this is crazy. What's going on? And so I'm sure I saw something, but it seems if you're on a Mac, it seems like FaceTime does that. So it's I'm not crazy or not sure I'm crazy. So
can we put the vote of the audience?
Can you what? Yeah, I don't know if other people saw that, but I think, I really believe I saw a bunch of balloons behind you. And so I'll send you the clip.
Yeah.
So let's do the last one. And it's called Adjusting Pay Negotiations After Initial Offer. This one is really one that I love because it's so common and HR is very, very good at doing that. And so a lot of them, so here's what the person says. I had an initial chat with HR for a marketing consultant role at a Fortune 500 company. When asked about my pay expectations, I blurted out $35 an hour. I realize I lowballed myself. The pay range is 30 to 50, and I actually aim for 40. How do I rectify this in the upcoming interview with the director without jeopardizing my chances? So do you guys think it's even possible to say, I know I said 35, but actually what I mean is 40? Maybe Mark, do you want to go first?
Not particularly, but
yeah, it's not,
you didn't give me a lot of choices there. It was sort of a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
Let's go back to what the answer should have been, which is I don't know enough about the job yet to know what my pay expectations are. So once I figure out what the job is, I can tell you what value I bring to it, and then I can triangulate there. So that would have taken them off.
That should have been the first answer.
But the second answer is, we talked before, and here's one of the things you really like about me. If I make a mistake, I'm very comfortable saying I made a mistake. So I made a mistake. I said 35. It was like an instantaneous reaction. I'm not very proud of it. I've done more research now. I'm better educated. I understand the company better. I understand the job better. And based on everything I've learned since then, here's what it looks like to me.
Yeah, that sounds convincing. That sounds reasonable. So, I think it's good. I wouldn't have thought of that. Thank you. What do you think, Hugo? Do you agree with that approach? Would you have another approach?
Yes, of course, take responsibility for mistakes is something you should do. I would, of course, thinking, do I have another alternative in the 40 range? Just to frame my approach. And otherwise, I would ask, okay, but I found out that the pay range is 30 to 50. And I would feel undervalued being paid 35. How are paid the people with my same amount of experience? Because we want to start a good working relationship, and starting being treated unfairly would not help it.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point. Thank you. And I think we have a couple of minutes for a last one, and it's also one that I thought was very, very interesting. So I shortened it a bit because the person was very long-winded, but the person says, addressing compensation ratio concerns. And basically, so they say, I've been dealing with a compensation ratio issue at work and could use some advice. Despite a 12% raise, I am now below the average pay for my grade level due to an increase in the pay scale range. So to explain, before it, they would know if they're above or below the average of their department. And so they were above the average of the department. And they were excited because they had a 12% increase. But now that they look where they are, they realize they're below the average of the department. So it seems that other people had a higher raise than 12%. So HR directed me to discuss this with my manager or skip level manager, which I don't know what that is. I'm nervous about negotiating this for the first time. Should I mention knowing my colleagues' salaries to bolster my case? Also, is it wise to express my demotivation regarding future promotions given the situation? Marc, I feel like you have a good answer for that. How would you deal as an employer with somebody with these questions?
Yeah. So first, just I can't resist it since it's the two of you that I'm talking to directly, but mode, median, or average.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just putting that out there. So it's
no, that's a very good point.
Right. So even if that were accurate and that's what the person said, my answer would be, so what? What's your point? Really explain to me. Okay.
And so maybe just for the audience, right? If you added into the mix somebody who's a very high earner, it could just raise the average for everybody, but not the mode. And so you would basically be able to say no, but that's because there is like two new very top performers that now it looks like you're below average, but you're not.
So if that's true, that's a great explanation that addressed they perceive themselves as being treated unfairly.
Yeah.
Right. So let's assume that that's not the case.
Right.
Right. They actually are below average, and that's because I value them below average.
Yeah.
Then I need to say, again, it's an absolute value. You're getting paid $82,000 a year. Does $82,000 a year, can you live on that? Is that comfortable? Okay. What does it mean relative to everybody else? It probably means that we have 10 ways of measuring people, and you're challenged on 6 or 7 of them. Yeah. So let me share with you the places you need to improve if your goal is to get up to average. I don't have to say you are below average. I can just say, these are the things you need to improve. And by the way, the message, there is no message. This was a mechanical calculation. There was no human who said, I don't value you, I value you less. There's no real judgment there, which it may be a very unsatisfactory answer to you, but it actually is the answer. And the bigger the organization, the more likely it is to be, it isn't personal to you.
Yeah. And I think, what do you think? I mean, I know what you're going to say, but it sounds like a really bad idea to express.
You assume I know what I'm going to say.
Oh, I think, no, I mean, because it's connecting to what you guys said before, but like, I'm assuming based on what you just said, that it's not a very strong argument to say, well, with that salary, now I'm demotivated.
Well, yes, you do know my answer.
Right.
I don't really want to hang out with demotivated people.
Exactly. Right.
You said to me that you really don't want to be here, and I can only say that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I have this issue all the time with my students, which is McGill is a very selective university. And so all of our students are A-level students. We're very lucky. And then suddenly they arrive and they're a B-level student. And so it's very hard to break that news to them because they reject it. Like they just really don't agree. They book meetings with you, very angry and all that stuff. And I'll always tell them, look, your performance for that essay was below average. That's what you have this grade, and I explained to them that it's not about negotiating a higher grade. It's not about me trying to prove them that they're better than average. It's about them becoming better than average.
Yeah. And also, for what it's worth, I'm not your parent. My job isn't to make you happy.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and also I don't care. Like I always say, I don't care about, for me, grades and GPAs. As we said before, I'm focused on fairness. I want you to have a fair grade, but the actual grade, I don't have any personal emotional attachment to this. My goal is to bring people through the finish line.
Yeah. So the message is there is no message, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. No, it's a
variable, and you take it off the table.
Yeah.
So this number means 2 things: an absolute value and where you are relative to people based on the following facts or the following statistics or the following whatever. If you don't finish the sentence by saying because, now you should have a very unhappy person. But you ranked where you ranked. You don't have to say again below average. You ranked where you ranked because these are the 7 variables we can consider, and that's how it shakes out.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to explain the because. If you can't explain why, it's a very hollow answer, and that will make people angry. Justified, in my opinion.
And again, I think maybe connecting to what you said before, but here, the person, the demotivation that they want to talk about or knowing other people's salary, none of it is interesting to you as an employer. None of it is motivating because it doesn't matter. It's just something that they care about, but the employer doesn't care about. They care about you having a good performance. Not, if you start saying that unless my salary increases, I'll be demotivated, it's a very, very negative signal to give people. And I know personally, if students told me, well, now I'm demotivated because you gave me a below average grade, I'd be thinking, you can be demotivated if you want. It's like, what do you want me to do? Ugo, how would you deal with, what advice would you give that person?
I don't know whether the person asked, did she ask for the 12% raise?
So they obtained a 12% raise, but they were under the impression that they would maintain their status as an above average paid employee.
If I was given the opportunity to choose my pay and I choose it poorly, and then I go to the boss and complain, you tell me flip a coin and pick a side. I say tail. Oh, heads, your fault. I cannot come to you and tell you. It's really. I would ask how to improve my global salary.
Yeah.
Ask
because it's the only thing that's aligned, right, with the employer. It's about saying, like, what can I do so that I'm not below average? And that's a much more interesting question.
By the way, as a matter of math, another thing to say to the person is, if everybody who got below average feels there has to be raised to above average, then it never happens because you never get there.
No, and that's what I tell my students that all the time. I say that if you have a curved class, you're going to have a bunch of people below average. It has to be somebody. I know nobody wants to be that person, but there you go.
Usually I ask at the beginning of my classes, who thinks to be better than the 50% of the people here negotiating?
Yeah.
And you get more than 50% of the people.
Yeah. No, absolute. Oh, I do that. It's funny. I do that in my main OB class I used to teach years ago. I would tell them, they knew nobody in the class, right? It was the first class. And I would tell them, where do you think you fit in the IQ distribution of this class? Is it the top 25%, 25 to 50%, and all that stuff? 60% of people think they fit in the top 25. And, and then they say to me, because, they push back, right? When I say, well, you guys, obviously you're wrong, right? Like, not all of you can be in the top 25%. But then they say, oh, I just picked randomly. Like, I don't know the people in this class. And I say, if you had picked randomly, you would have really picked randomly, and you'd have 25% in each category, but you all directed yourselves to the more desirable one. So I always think it's very interesting. I do that to explain the curve, that it's normal that they have a feeling that they're better than average. It's a general feeling, but it doesn't mean that in reality.
Earlier you mentioned that people always think whatever they own is more valuable than if someone else owned it. If you're asking people the value of their house on a street of identical houses, the one that you live in is always the one that you value most highly.
Yeah.
Right. And
absolutely.
That's just a fact. And part of it is it's a myopic vision of the world, right? You don't see the other people. You've got no basis, but mostly it's, if it's mine, it's inherently more valuable. And
absolutely.
Right.
But I do think, and I think it's very, very widespread, but I do think some people are the opposite, or the other way around, when they have a lot of assertiveness problems and they just accept any deal, and low self-esteem. And that it's a smaller portion. Like, most people think very favorably of themselves, but I've also noticed sometimes just people are willing to accept anything, and they're just not good at selling themselves.
Well, they don't like conflict, and they perceive this inherently as conflict. Mm-hmm. And if you approach it as educational exploration, it isn't conflict; it's interaction.
It's a discussion.
Piece number one, right? It sort of depends on how you were brought up. I'll just make this pretty personal to me. I was brought up that if you were talking about yourself and that you were bragging and you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of context and family and history of how you learned to be who you are, what informed who you are.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that I'm very comfortable being super aggressive on behalf of someone else. And I would never be that aggressive
For yourself.
for me. I would never do it.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's a very, very good point. Okay.
So,
yeah.
I was to say, so if you say to somebody, pretend that you are advocating for you because it's you're Jackie or you're Jasmine or you're Joe, what would you say?
Yeah.
People will think about themselves differently. Oh, well, Jasmine would think, okay, well then, let's guess what they might want to go with.
So it's interesting. One of the more concrete findings, I think it's from the 90s in the negotiation research, is about gender. There's an obsession about gender in negotiation research. I'd say it's like 80% of papers. And so they were looking at how come women tend to be less assertive at the negotiation table than men, and can you find a way to make them as assertive? And one of the things they had realized in that paper is that women, when they were negotiating for themselves, they were a little bit less assertive, but when they were negotiating for another party, were a lot more assertive, kind of like the mama bear kind of thing, you know, that's going to protect their own, right? And so they were always saying, and I think it's not just for women. I think, you know, it overlaps, but I think, you know, it benefits a lot of men as well. But if you're feeling that just fighting for you, you're pretty much willing to get any deal because you want to avoid the conflict, then you have to think about, and that's what I tell my students a lot of times, who are you doing this for? Who will this benefit to? It's going to benefit indirectly to your kids, to your spouse. You know, you have to think about them when you're negotiating this. And a lot of times it gives them the strength of actually doing it.
It also lets them advocate as a fiduciary to someone else.
Yeah.
And most people, whether they would say it that way or not, if I'm a fiduciary, I've got an obligation to do this.
Yeah.
Not a choice. It's an obligation to protect and defend. And so that's a great way to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys, thank you so much for your time today. I'm very, very appreciative. I've learned a lot from both of you, and I'm sure the crowd has learned a lot as well. So thank you so much for both of you. Please go follow Ugo and Marc on LinkedIn. Their LinkedIn profile is linked in the description. Please buy the book from Marc. You can go buy it on Amazon. Don't forget to sign on my newsletter. This is where you can get invitations to my new events. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you, you guys.
Thanks for letting.
Thank you, Jayan. Thank you, Marc. I learned a lot from both of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Vice versa.
Have a good one. I'm going to play the little jingle. Where is it? It's here.